He invited his poor ex to his company party to show off his success. But when she walked in with twins holding his baby photos, his millionaire facade crumbled. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. The light of an autumn afternoon filtered through the tall windows of Lorenzo's, an elegant restaurant nestled on Chicago's Michigan Avenue. Rebecca Johnson paused, tray balanced expertly on her palm, to admire how the sunlight caught the crystal glasses she had just polished. At 22, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that belied her circumstances, a small-town girl from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, working double shifts to save for college. "Excuse me." A deep voice pulled Rebecca from her thoughts. "Could I get another scotch? Neat, please." Rebecca turned, professional smile already in place, to face the man at table 7. Her smile faltered for just a moment as she took in his appearance: impeccably tailored suit, hair styled with casual precision, and a Rolex that probably cost more than her annual rent. "Of course, sir. Right away." As she moved toward the bar, Rebecca felt his eyes following her. It wasn't an unusual sensation. Attractive waitresses often attracted attention, but something about this particular gaze felt different, more appraising than appreciative. When she returned with his drink, he gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Join me for a moment?" Rebecca glanced around nervously. "I'm sorry, sir. I'm working." "Mark," he corrected, his confident smile suggesting he wasn't accustomed to hearing no. "Mark Reynolds, and I'm sure your manager would understand. I'm a very good tipper." As if to prove his point, he slid a $100 bill across the table. Rebecca hesitated, then placed his scotch down without taking the money. "Thank you, Mr. Reynolds, but I should get back to my other tables." His eyebrows rose slightly, a flicker of genuine interest crossing his features. "At least tell me your name." "Rebecca," she replied, her Midwestern politeness winning out. "Rebecca," he repeated, as though testing the feel of it. "I'll see you again, Rebecca." And he did. For the next 2 weeks, Mark Reynolds appeared at Lorenzo's almost daily, always requesting Rebecca's section, always leaving obscenely generous tips. On her 3rd day off, he sent flowers to the restaurant. By the end of the month, his persistence wore down her reservations. "1 drink," she finally agreed after her shift ended. Just 1. That night, Mark took her to the rooftop bar of the Hancock Tower. Chicago spread below them like a carpet of stars, Lake Michigan a vast darkness beyond. "I've never seen the city like this," Rebecca breathed, clutching her cocktail as the wind played with her hair. Mark watched her reaction with satisfaction. "There's a whole world out there, Rebecca. One I'd like to show you." Later, as she transferred the tips from her apron to her wallet, Rebecca set aside $200. The money order to her mother in Iowa would be larger this month. Since her father's death 3 years ago, her mother's arthritis had worsened, making work increasingly difficult. The extra money would help with medication. "Your mother's lucky to have you," Mark commented when she explained the money order. Rebecca shook her head. "I'm the lucky one. She gave up so much for me." Mark's fingers brushed hers as he took her glass to refill it. "And what are you giving up, Rebecca from Iowa?" She looked away, toward the glittering skyline. "Just time. Once I save enough for college, I'll be back on track." "What will you study? Business? Maybe marketing? I want to build something." Mark smiled. "I can help with that." 2 months into their relationship, Mark invited Rebecca to a charity gala at the Art Institute. She spent a week's salary on a dress that still looked inexpensive next to the designer gowns surrounding her. Mark kept his hand at the small of her back, guiding her through a world of old money and older names. "Everyone, this is Rebecca," he introduced her, his mouth close to her ear as he added, "my refreshing secret." Later, waiting for him outside the restrooms, Rebecca overheard 2 women talking. "Mark Reynolds' latest charity case," one laughed. He always finds these little provincial girls. They never last past the novelty phase. His father would have a stroke if he thought this one was serious, the other replied. The Reynolds name needs a strategic marriage, not some waitress from wherever. Rebecca felt her face burn, but when Mark returned, she said nothing. That night, in his penthouse overlooking the lake, he kissed away her doubts, whispering promises against her skin. She believed him because she needed to, because his world felt like an escape from years of struggle. By month 4, Rebecca had moved into a small but elegant apartment that Mark paid for, until you start classes. They spent weekends exploring Chicago's exclusive spots, weeknights tangled in expensive sheets. Rebecca's mother expressed concern about the relationship's speed, but Rebecca assured her everything was perfect. In January, Chicago froze under a bitter cold snap. Rebecca woke early, rushing to the bathroom as nausea overtook her for the 3rd morning in a row. Afterwards, she sat on the bathroom floor, counting days on her fingers again and again, hoping for a different result. The pregnancy test took 3 minutes to develop. Rebecca watched the second line appear, faint at first, then unmistakable. She pressed a trembling hand to her still flat stomach, tears falling silently. That evening, she prepared Mark's favorite meal, setting the table with the care of someone arranging a life-changing moment. The bottle of wine remained unopened. When Mark arrived, he kissed her absently, his mind still on work. "You're quiet tonight," he remarked halfway through dinner. Rebecca set down her fork, gathering courage. "Mark, I need to tell you something." He looked up, his attention finally fully on her. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed stretched like a chasm between them. Mark's expression froze, his fork suspended midway to his mouth. He slowly set it down, then ran his hands through his perfectly styled hair. "Pregnant," he repeated, as though testing an unfamiliar word. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a cold, sharp sound that made Rebecca flinch. "This wasn't part of the plan," he said finally. "I know we didn't plan this," Rebecca said quickly, reaching for his hand, "but we can make it work. There is no we, Rebecca." His voice had turned to ice, his eyes no longer seeing the woman he'd whispered promises to, but an inconvenience to be managed. "It was fun while it lasted, but I always knew this had an expiration date." Rebecca felt the room tilt around her. "What are you saying? I thought you loved me." "Love?" Mark's expression softened with something like pity. "You're sweet, Rebecca. That's what attracted me to you. But my father has plans for me, for the company. We need strategic alliances that only the right marriage can provide." He leaned forward, his voice gentler but no less final. "Did you really think a waitress from Iowa could become a Reynolds?" Each word landed like a physical blow. Rebecca's hands moved protectively to her stomach. "This is our child," she whispered. Mark's face hardened again. "My life is laid out, Rebecca. The Reynolds Enterprises is worth billions. My father expects me to marry someone who strengthens our position, not someone who serves drinks for a living." Rebecca began to cry, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. "Please, Mark, just think about it. We could—" The sound of his Italian leather wallet opening silenced her. Mark extracted several crisp bills, counting them before tossing them onto the kitchen table. $200, he said, adjusting his Rolex. "Get rid of the problem or forget you ever knew me." "It's our baby," Rebecca said, her voice barely audible. Mark stood, straightening his tie with practiced precision. "You'll never be enough for someone like me," he said, his tone almost conversational. "I'd rather lose millions than ruin my future with you and that bastard." The door slammed behind him with sickening finality. Through the window, Rebecca watched his silver Porsche disappear into the Chicago night, taking with it all the dreams she'd nurtured. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of desperation. Rebecca discovered the apartment lease had only 3 months remaining. Her few Chicago acquaintances, all friends of Mark's, stopped returning her calls. When she tried calling the Reynolds mansion, a cold voice informed her that further contact would be considered harassment. Her final attempt came 2 weeks after that night. Dressed in her best clothes, Rebecca went to the Reynolds Enterprises headquarters downtown. The security guards listened to her request to see Mark, their eyes communicating silently before one made a call. "Miss Johnson?" the guard said, returning. "Mr. Reynolds is in meetings all day." "I'll wait," Rebecca insisted, taking a seat in the lobby. An hour later, 2 security officers approached. "Miss Johnson, we need to escort you from the premises." As they guided her firmly toward the exit, one murmured, "He said you might show up. Do yourself a favor and give up." That afternoon, Rebecca sat in a different kind of waiting room, clutching her purse as the ultrasound technician spread gel across her abdomen. The screen flickered to life, the technician's expression changing from routine concentration to surprise. "Well, Miss Johnson," she said, turning the screen, "there's your baby, and there's your other baby." "Other baby?" Rebecca echoed. "2 heartbeats," the technician confirmed. "You're having twins." Rebecca's sob caught in her throat, not just fear now, but a fierce protective determination taking root. 2 lives depended on her. 2 lives Mark had discarded as a problem. In the months that followed, Rebecca worked herself to exhaustion. Mornings at the diner, evenings at a telemarketing center, weekends cleaning houses in wealthy neighborhoods. Every dollar saved, every humiliation swallowed as her growing body drew judgmental looks. The nadir came when she couldn't make rent. After packing her few belongings into her old Honda, Rebecca spent the night reclined in the driver's seat, her 6-month pregnant belly pressed uncomfortably against the steering wheel. Rain pattered on the roof as she stared into the darkness, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. "I promise you both," she whispered, hands cradling her stomach. "You'll never know the humiliation I felt when your father threw us away like garbage. You'll never need him because I'll be everything you need. And someday, he'll see exactly what he lost." On that cold Chicago night, as Rebecca cried herself to sleep in her car, her hand protectively covering her unborn twins, she couldn't possibly imagine that 15 years later she would be commanding a billion-dollar empire, looking into the eyes of the man who had once deemed her insufficient. The rain intensified as Rebecca curled uncomfortably in the driver's seat, her hands protectively cradling her swollen belly. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by the cramping in her legs and the persistent chill that the car's broken heater couldn't dispel. When morning finally broke, gray and unwelcoming, Rebecca's face reflected in the rearview mirror told the story of her desperation, dark circles under puffy eyes, hair limp with grease, hope fading fast. A sharp rap on the window startled her awake. A police officer peered in, his expression shifting from suspicion to concern when he noticed her pregnant state. "Ma'am, everything okay in there?" Rebecca forced a smile, maternal instinct already teaching her to hide her suffering. "Yes, officer. Just resting before work." His eyes took in the bags in the back seat, the pillow wedged against the door. "You sleeping in this car, miss?" "Just temporarily," she managed, shame burning her cheeks. "I'm between apartments, starting a new lease next week." The lie tasted bitter, but less bitter than the truth. After the officer reluctantly left, making her promise to find somewhere safer tonight, Rebecca started the car with trembling hands. The dashboard clock read 6:15, enough time to wash up in a gas station bathroom before her breakfast shift at the diner. Later that morning, Rebecca stood before the payphone outside the diner, quarter in hand, rehearsing what to say. 3 rings, then a familiar voice. "Mark Reynolds' office. This is Rebecca Johnson. I need to speak with Mark, please." She fought to keep her voice steady. A pause. "I'm sorry, Ms. Johnson, but Mr. Reynolds has instructed—" "Please," Rebecca interrupted, desperation breaking through. "I'm pregnant with his children, twins. I've lost my apartment. I just need to talk to him." The silence on the other end stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Ms. Johnson, I've been directed to inform you that continued attempts to contact Mr. Reynolds will be considered harassment. The Reynolds family has attorneys who specialize in handling such matters. He's the father of my... The line went dead. Rebecca hung up the receiver, leaning against the cold metal booth as tears threatened. She wouldn't cry. Not here, not where her manager might see and decide a weeping pregnant woman was bad for business. That evening, Rebecca sat in her car, methodically dialing Mark's cell phone for the 12th time that week. Each call went straight to voicemail. After the beep, she spoke softly. "Mark, it's Rebecca. Please call me back. I found out we're having twins. I'm not asking for us to be together if you don't want that, but these are your children. Her voice broke. "I had to sleep in my car last night. Please just call me." She deleted the message before sending it. What was the point? She'd tried variations of this plea for 2 weeks with no response. The next morning brought new humiliation. Rebecca sat across from a middle-aged property manager, his eyes repeatedly dropping to her visible pregnancy before returning to her rental application. "Your income," he trailed off, frowning. 3 part-time jobs, no benefits, and... He gestured vaguely toward her stomach. "I always pay on time," Rebecca insisted. "I have references from my previous landlord." "Look," he sighed, "we need tenants with stable income. Your situation is complicated, and in a few months, you'll have 2 infants in a studio apartment." "I'll make it work," she promised, hating the pleading in her voice. "I'm sorry." He slid her application back across the desk. "We have other qualified applicants." That afternoon, Rebecca sat in her obstetrician's waiting room, surrounded by couples holding hands, sharing excited whispers. She stared at the worn magazine in her lap, not reading, just avoiding eye contact with the happy families that reminded her of everything she didn't have. "Rebecca Johnson?" the ultrasound technician called, same as last time, but with a smile of recognition. "How are those twins doing?" Inside the examination room, Rebecca watched the screen as 2 distinct shapes appeared, each with a flickering heartbeat. The technician pointed out features, heads, arms, legs, while Rebecca lay silently, tears sliding sideways into her hair. "Would you like to know the sexes?" the technician asked gently. Rebecca nodded, unable to speak. "Looks like a boy and a girl. Congratulations." A boy and a girl. The perfect matched set. The family she would build alone because their father had declared her unworthy. Outside in the parking lot, sitting in her car that now served as both transportation and shelter, Rebecca allowed herself 5 minutes of complete breakdown. She sobbed until her throat hurt, until her scrubs shirt was wet with tears. Then, with mechanical precision, she wiped her face, reapplied minimal makeup, and drove to her evening telemarketing shift. "Hello, my name is Rebecca, calling from Midwest Insurance Solutions. Do you have a moment to discuss your coverage options?" Over and over for 4 hours, while her back ached and her ankles swelled inside 2 tight shoes. Saturday morning, Rebecca knocked on the door of a sprawling Lincoln Park home, cleaning supplies in hand. The housekeeping agency had started her on probation, warning that pregnant women often couldn't handle the physical demands. She was determined to prove them wrong. "You'll do the bathrooms, kitchen, and vacuum all floors," instructed the homeowner, a woman in expensive yoga wear who barely looked at Rebecca. "We'll be out until 4. Don't touch anything in my husband's office." For 6 hours, Rebecca scrubbed toilets, mopped floors, and dusted furniture belonging to people who had everything she lacked: security, comfort, legitimacy. In one child's bedroom, she paused before a pair of cribs, matching and perfect, awaiting twins not unlike her own. Her hand moved involuntarily to her stomach. "You deserve better than car seats and diner booths," she whispered to her unborn children. By the time March arrived, Rebecca had established a grim routine. Morning shifts at the diner, evening telemarketing, weekend house cleaning. In between, she showered at a gym where she'd paid the minimum membership fee, stored her few remaining possessions in her car, and slept wherever she could, sometimes in her car, sometimes on the break room couch at the diner when her sympathetic manager looked the other way. The pregnancy advanced relentlessly. At 7 months, her uniform barely contained her expanded abdomen. Customers at the diner left smaller tips, their disapproving glances communicating their judgment of her ringless finger and swollen belly. One Tuesday morning, Rebecca stood at the diner counter tallying receipts when dizziness overtook her. The room tilted alarmingly, voices became distant, and then darkness. She awoke on the break room couch, her manager's worried face swimming into view. "Rebecca, thank God, I was about to call an ambulance." "I'm fine," she insisted, struggling to sit up. "Just stood too long." "You're not fine," he countered firmly. "Dr. Michaels from the clinic next door checked you out. He says you're exhausted and dehydrated. You need rest, proper meals." Rebecca laughed bitterly. "Rest? In my car? Proper meals from where? I have $17 until payday." Her manager, Mike, a gruff man who rarely showed emotion, sat heavily in the folding chair beside her. "Rebecca, I've been watching you come in more exhausted every day. You're sleeping in your car, aren't you?" The kindness in his voice nearly broke her. She nodded, unable to speak. "My sister runs a women's shelter in Evanston. It's not fancy, but it's clean, safe. They have programs for—" He gestured toward her belly. The word shelter burned like acid. She had fallen that far. "I still need to work," she said finally. "The job will be here," he promised. "But those babies need you healthy." That night, in the stark but clean room at Haven House Women's Shelter, Rebecca lay on a narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. Around her, other women's soft breathing filled the darkness. Women running from abuse, addiction, poverty. Women like her, who had believed a man's promises. Morning brought a new routine. Breakfast in the shelter's communal kitchen, prenatal vitamins provided by a church donation, a social worker asking questions Rebecca was too proud to answer truthfully. "The father's situation?" the social worker prompted, pen poised over a form. "Not involved," Rebecca replied flatly. "Have you pursued child support? With twins, you'll need—" "He made it clear he wants nothing to do with us," Rebecca interrupted. "I'm not begging anyone for help." The social worker looked up, her expression softening. "It's not begging, Rebecca. It's holding someone accountable for their responsibilities." "You don't understand," Rebecca said quietly. "His family has power, connections. They've already threatened legal action if I keep contacting them." 2 more weeks passed. Rebecca continued working, ignoring her doctor's warnings about overexertion. Each night she returned to the shelter, increasingly grateful for the safety it provided, but determined it would be temporary. Her children would not grow up in institutional care. On a windy April morning, Rebecca trudged up the steps of a particularly opulent Lakeshore Drive mansion. The housekeeping agency had assigned her a new client, warning that Mrs. Knight was particular but paid exceptionally well. Every dollar mattered now. The elegant white-haired woman who answered the door assessed Rebecca with sharp blue eyes, lingering on her advanced pregnancy. "You're the replacement cleaner?" she asked, voice crisp but not unkind. "Yes, ma'am. Rebecca Johnson." Mrs. Knight led her through rooms of understated luxury, antique furniture, original artwork, shelves of leather-bound books. "Kitchen, bathrooms, floors," she instructed. "Don't worry about the upper level today." Rebecca worked methodically, grateful that Mrs. Knight retreated to her study instead of hovering like some clients. In the kitchen, she found herself polishing an already immaculate floor, the scent of lemon cleaner mixing with sudden nausea. She gripped the counter as spots danced before her eyes. Not here, she thought desperately. Not at this job. The room tilted sideways. The last thing Rebecca registered was the cold tile rushing up to meet her and the distant sound of breaking glass. She awoke to the sensation of something cool against her forehead. Mrs. Knight sat beside her on a sofa, pressing a damp cloth to Rebecca's face. "Welcome back," the older woman said calmly. "Don't try to sit up just yet." Rebecca's mortification was complete. "I'm so sorry. The agency will send someone else. I'll pay for anything I broke." "Hush," Mrs. Knight interrupted. "The only thing that broke was an easily replaceable water glass. What isn't replaceable is you, or those babies you're carrying." Tears of exhaustion and shame welled in Rebecca's eyes. "I need this job." "What you need," Mrs. Knight said firmly, "is tea, a proper meal, and to tell me why a young woman in your condition is pushing herself to the brink of collapse." Perhaps it was the genuine concern in the woman's voice, so different from the clinical sympathy of shelter workers or the awkward pity of her diner manager. Perhaps it was simply that Rebecca had reached her breaking point. Whatever the reason, the story spilled out. Mark, the pregnancy, the abandonment, the nights in her car, the shelter, the desperate scramble to save enough for her children's future. When she finished, Mrs. Knight sat silent for a long moment. Then, with unexpected gentleness, she took Rebecca's hand. "My mother was abandoned, pregnant with me, in 1950, she said quietly. "I know exactly what you're facing." That simple statement of understanding broke something in Rebecca. She sobbed openly, months of stoic suffering finally finding release. Later, composed and slightly embarrassed, Rebecca sipped tea in Mrs. Knight's sunlit kitchen. "My guest room has its own bathroom," Mrs. Knight said matter-of-factly. "It's yours, for as long as you need it." "I can't accept charity," Rebecca protested weakly. "It's not charity," the older woman corrected. "I've been looking for a live-in assistant. You'll earn your keep. And—" She hesitated, then continued more softly. "This house has been too empty since my Harold passed." That evening, as Rebecca unpacked her meager possessions in the spacious guest room, now her room, Mrs. Knight appeared in the doorway holding a laptop. "There's a digital marketing certificate program that can be completed online before your delivery," she explained. "I've taken the liberty of registering you. The first class starts Monday." "Mrs. Knight, I can't possibly—" "Barbara," the older woman corrected. "And yes, you can. I was on the board of the tech company my husband founded. I still have connections. This industry needs smart women." In the weeks that followed, Rebecca established a new routine. Working at the diner mornings, studying digital marketing evenings, her nights spent in actual comfort for the first time in months. Barbara proved to be not just a landlady but a mentor, sharing wisdom from her own successful career in advertising. On endless nights studying while her ankles swelled and her back ached, Rebecca forged her promise. "One day, Mark Reynolds will look at me and know that I was always more than enough." With a tired but determined hand pressed against her growing belly, sitting in the comfortable guest room of a woman who had once walked a similar path, Rebecca couldn't possibly imagine that in 15 years she would stand in one of Manhattan's most prestigious buildings, making decisions that would shake the very foundations of the company Mark Reynolds was struggling to keep relevant. Barbara Knight's elegant townhouse became a sanctuary Rebecca had never dared to dream of. As May bloomed across Chicago, the guest room, now officially Rebecca's room, had transformed from a temporary shelter into something that cautiously resembled home. Each morning, Rebecca would wake to sunlight filtering through actual curtains, not car windows, and for those first few conscious moments, the weight of her circumstances felt marginally lighter. On a particularly warm spring morning, Rebecca sat at Barbara's kitchen island, nursing a cup of herbal tea while reviewing her digital marketing coursework. The laptop, a gift from Barbara that Rebecca had initially tried to refuse, displayed engagement metrics for a hypothetical campaign. The course was challenging, especially for someone whose education had been interrupted, but Rebecca attacked each assignment with fierce determination. "You're up early," Barbara observed, entering the kitchen in her silk robe. At 68, Barbara Knight carried herself with the confident grace of a woman who had spent decades in boardrooms dominated by men. "Couldn't sleep," Rebecca admitted, shifting uncomfortably. At 7 months pregnant with twins, Finding a comfortable position had become nearly impossible. Plus, I have this case study due. Barbara poured herself coffee from the machine Rebecca had programmed to start brewing at 6. "You're pushing yourself too hard." Rebecca shook her head, instinctively cradling her swollen belly. "Not hard enough. I have less than 2 months to finish this certificate before they arrive." Barbara settled across from her, blue eyes sharp with concern. "Rebecca, may I share something personal with you?" Rebecca nodded, surprised by the unusual hesitation in her typically forthright benefactor. "My mother was 17 when she became pregnant with me," Barbara began, fingers tracing the rim of her coffee mug. "The father was the son of her father's business partner, supposedly her ticket to security. When she told him about me, he denied everything, called her desperate, claimed she'd been with others." Rebecca's hand instinctively tightened around her mug. "My grandfather threw her out that night. It was 1950. An unwed pregnant girl was considered beyond redemption." Barbara's gaze turned distant. "She slept on park benches before finding a church shelter. Worked as a seamstress until the day I was born." "What happened to her?" Rebecca asked softly. Barbara's smile turned bittersweet. "She raised me alone, worked her way up to owning a small alteration shop, put me through college with those tired hands." She extended her own well-manicured fingers. "I know exactly what you're facing, Rebecca. The world has changed in some ways since then, but abandonment feels the same in any decade." Rebecca felt tears threatening, not from self-pity, but from the unexpected gift of being truly understood. "I wouldn't have survived without you," she admitted, the words catching in her throat. Barbara reached across the island, covering Rebecca's hand with her own. "That's not true. You would have found a way. You're a survivor. I've just made the path a little smoother." Later that morning, Barbara led Rebecca through the double doors of an unused bedroom at the back of the house. Morning light spilled through bay windows onto hardwood floors and pale blue walls. "I thought perhaps—" Barbara gestured to the empty space, uncharacteristically hesitant. "The light is good here and it's quiet. It could make a suitable nursery." Rebecca stood frozen in the doorway, overwhelmed by the generosity of the offer. This wasn't just a room, it was Barbara acknowledging that Rebecca and her babies might stay, might become something more permanent than temporary charity. "We can't impose," Rebecca began. "Nonsense," Barbara interrupted briskly, returning to her usual decisiveness. "This house has 5 bedrooms and only 1 occupant. It's wasteful." That weekend, they visited a second-hand furniture store where Barbara insisted on purchasing 2 gently used cribs. "An investment in my future peace and quiet," she claimed when Rebecca protested. "Babies sleep better in proper beds." As they arranged the cribs against the nursery wall, Rebecca felt a strange mixture of gratitude and grief. This wasn't how she had imagined preparing for her children's arrival, without a partner, dependent on a stranger's kindness. Yet the calm determination in Barbara's movements as she assembled the changing table reminded Rebecca that she wasn't alone anymore. "Yellow," Barbara decided, studying the walls. "Not pink or blue. Too predictable. Yellow is cheerful, gender-neutral." The following day, Rebecca found herself in paint-splattered overalls, carefully applying soft yellow paint while Barbara supervised from a safe distance, claiming her artistic consultation was more valuable than her painting skills. "My mother painted my nursery yellow too," Barbara shared, watching Rebecca work. "Said it was the color of hope." Evening found them admiring the freshly painted room, the scent of paint mingling with the Italian takeout Barbara had insisted on ordering. "To celebrate progress," she'd declared. As they ate at the kitchen island, Barbara unexpectedly produced a thick folder from her briefcase. "I've been meaning to show you this," she said, sliding it across the counter. "The digital marketing program you're in is excellent but limited. This is information about a bachelor's completion program at Northwestern. Classes are flexible, many online. There are scholarships for single mothers." Rebecca stared at the folder, then at Barbara. "College? I can't even think about that right now." "Not immediately," Barbara agreed, "but after the babies are settled. Your certificate program will get you entry-level work, but a degree will open doors." "I haven't been in school for years," Rebecca protested. "And with twins." "My mother finished her high school diploma with me in a bassinet beside her desk," Barbara said firmly. "Difficult doesn't mean impossible." That night, after Barbara had retired, Rebecca sat cross-legged on her bed, as cross-legged as her pregnancy allowed, and opened the Northwestern folder. The tuition figures made her stomach clench, but the scholarship information sparked a tiny flame of possibility. She pulled out her phone, finger hovering over Mark's number. In moments of weakness, she still found herself wanting to tell him things, ask questions. Would the twins have his eyes, his smile? Would they inherit his confidence, his easy charm? Or would they be strangers to him forever? Rebecca deleted his number with a decisive tap. Whatever gifts or challenges her children inherited from Mark Reynolds, they would never inherit his abandonment of them. She would make certain of that. The weeks that followed established a new rhythm. Mornings at the diner, afternoons studying, evenings helping Barbara prepare the nursery. Barbara insisted Rebecca cut back her hours as her due date approached, supplementing the lost income with what she called a living stipend in exchange for help managing her household affairs. "You have excellent organizational skills," Barbara observed one evening as Rebecca efficiently sorted through a backlog of Barbara's correspondence. "The corporate world needs more of that." Rebecca smiled, pleased at the praise but distracted by the stack of hospital pre-registration forms waiting for her attention. The reality of impending childbirth, without a partner, without family nearby, loomed larger each day. "What if something goes wrong?" she asked suddenly, the fear she'd been suppressing bursting forth. "What if there are complications? What if I can't handle 2 newborns?" Barbara set down her reading glasses, giving Rebecca her full attention. "Valid concerns, which is why I've arranged for a postpartum doula to assist for the first month." "A what?" "A professional who helps new mothers after birth," Barbara explained. "Particularly helpful with twins. She'll teach you feeding techniques, help with light housekeeping, allow you to sleep." Rebecca stared at her, speechless. "Consider it a practical gift," Barbara continued matter-of-factly. "More useful than stuffed animals or tiny outfits they'll outgrow in weeks." When Rebecca found her voice, it was thick with emotion. "Why are you doing all this for me?" Barbara was silent for a long moment. "Because someone should have done it for my mother," she said finally. "Because breaking cycles matters. And because—" She hesitated, uncharacteristically vulnerable. "You remind me of the daughter I never had." The admission hung in the air between them, unexpected and profound. Late June brought heat that made Rebecca's swollen ankles throb and her back ache constantly. Barbara installed a window air conditioning unit in Rebecca's room and nursery, ignoring Rebecca's protests about the electric bill. "Heat is dangerous for pregnant women," Barbara declared. "Consider it a medical necessity." On the last day of June, Rebecca completed her final digital marketing course assignment. As she submitted the project, a comprehensive campaign strategy for a fictional startup, a strange sense of accomplishment washed over her. For the first time since that devastating January night in her kitchen, she had finished something, created something, succeeded at something. "I did it," she announced to Barbara, who looked up from her newspaper with a knowing smile. "I never doubted you would," Barbara replied. "What's next?" Rebecca patted her enormous belly. "Next is surviving whatever these two have planned for me." "And after that?" Rebecca hesitated, then reached for the Northwestern application forms she'd been quietly completing in stolen moments. "After that, maybe this." Barbara's smile widened. "Now you're thinking like a knight." The comment was casual, but it lingered in Rebecca's mind as she prepared for bed that night. Standing before the bathroom mirror, she studied her reflection. The exhaustion in her eyes, the determination in her jaw, the life growing within her. "Rebecca Knight," she whispered experimentally, tasting the syllables. Her own surname had never felt particularly meaningful, common, unmemorable. But Knight? There was strength in it, purpose. In the quiet of her room, Rebecca opened her laptop one more time, navigating to a document she'd been crafting in private moments. The title read, "5-Year Plan." Below it, bullet points outlined steps toward independence, certificate completion, part-time work while babies are small, degree program enrollment, career goals. At the bottom, she'd written, "One day, Mark Reynolds will look at me and know that I was always more than enough." She stared at the words, thinking of Barbara's mother, of Barbara herself, of the babies who would soon arrive. Then, with deliberate keystrokes, she added a new line. "But by then, his opinion won't matter anymore." Sitting in her comfortable room in Barbara Knight's elegant home, laptop glowing in the darkness, Rebecca couldn't possibly imagine that in 15 years she would stand in one of Manhattan's most prestigious buildings, making decisions that would shake the very foundations of the company Mark Reynolds was struggling to keep relevant. Rebecca's promise glowed on the screen in the darkness of her room, a digital oath that would shape the next 15 years of her life. She closed the laptop, one hand resting protectively over her swollen belly as the twins shifted restlessly within. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, she allowed herself the luxury of hope. The first contraction hit 3 days later, as Rebecca helped Barbara organize her filing cabinet. A sudden, gripping pain that made her gasp and clutch the edge of the desk. "Just Braxton Hicks," she insisted, though her knuckles whitened with the force of her grip. Barbara raised a skeptical eyebrow but said nothing. 2 hours later, as they sat down for lunch, Rebecca's water broke. "I suppose those weren't Braxton Hicks after all," she admitted, looking down at the puddle forming beneath her chair with a mixture of embarrassment and terror. Barbara sprang into action with military precision, grabbing the pre-packed hospital bag, calling the doctor, and guiding Rebecca to the car. Her calm efficiency anchored Rebecca as the reality of imminent motherhood crashed over her like a tidal wave. "I can't do this," Rebecca whispered, as another contraction gripped her on the drive to Northwestern Memorial Hospital. The August heat pressed against the car windows, making the air inside feel thick and oppressive despite the air conditioning. Barbara's hand found hers across the console. "You already are doing it." The next 36 hours blurred into a haze of pain, exhaustion, and fear. Rebecca's labor progressed slowly, her body struggling to deliver 2 babies instead of 1. The contractions built like ocean waves, each one stronger than the last, until Rebecca felt she might be swept away entirely. "I can't," she repeated during a particularly brutal contraction, sweat plastering her hair to her forehead. "I'm not strong enough." Barbara, who hadn't left her side except when medical staff insisted, gripped her hand tightly. "You are stronger than you know, Rebecca. You've already survived the impossible." In the brief respites between contractions, Rebecca found her thoughts drifting to Mark. In her original daydreams of this moment, he had been there, holding her hand, whispering encouragement. The reality, Barbara's steady presence, nurses' clinical efficiency, and Mark's complete absence, was a stark reminder of how thoroughly her life had diverged from those dreams. After 34 hours, the doctor's concern grew visible. "The babies are showing signs of distress," she explained gently. "We need to consider a C-section." Fear clawed at Rebecca's throat. Surgery meant longer recovery, more difficulties caring for newborns, more dependency. But the monitor's irregular beeping left no room for debate. "Do it," she agreed, tears sliding from the corners of her eyes. "Just make sure they're safe." The operating room was blindingly bright and cold. Rebecca shivered on the table as the anesthesiologist explained the spinal block procedure. Barbara, now dressed in scrubs and a surgical mask, sat by Rebecca's head, her eyes above the mask radiating calm certainty. "You're not alone," she reminded Rebecca as the doctors worked behind the blue surgical drape. "I'm right here." At 3:17 in the morning on August 12th, Emily Grace Johnson entered the world with a furious cry that filled the operating room. 3 minutes later, her brother Ethan James Johnson followed, his wail slightly softer but equally indignant. "Twins," announced the doctor, holding up the first tiny, vernix-covered infant for Rebecca to glimpse before whisking her away for cleaning. "A girl and a boy. Perfect." Rebecca's tears flowed freely as the nurses brought her cleaned and swaddled babies, placing them carefully in her arms for their first proper meeting. Through blurry vision, she studied their tiny faces. Emily with a dusting of dark hair, Ethan nearly bald but for a few blonde wisps. When Emily opened her eyes, Rebecca's breath caught. Even through the newborn cloudiness, the striking blue was unmistakable. Mark's eyes staring back at her from their daughter's face. "They're beautiful," Barbara whispered, her own eyes suspiciously bright. Rebecca nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. In that moment, despite the surgery pain, despite the months of abandonment and struggle, despite the uncertain future, she felt a love so fierce it nearly overwhelmed her. Later, alone in her hospital room with the twins sleeping in clear bassinets beside her bed, Rebecca made her whispered promise. "You'll never know the humiliation I felt when your father threw us away like garbage. You'll never need him, because I'll be everything you need. And someday, he'll see what he lost." The reality of twin newborns hit like a freight train. Rebecca's carefully structured days dissolved into a chaotic blur of feedings, diaper changes, and stolen moments of sleep. The postpartum doula Barbara had hired proved invaluable, teaching Rebecca how to tandem breastfeed, how to soothe one baby while changing the other, how to function on fragments of rest. Feed one, the other wakes up. Change that one, the first needs burping. Put them both down, they tag team crying, Rebecca explained to Barbara one morning, dark circles underscoring her eyes as she mechanically ate the breakfast Barbara had prepared. "Sounds like excellent preparation for corporate negotiations," Barbara observed dryly. "They're teaching you persistence." Despite the exhaustion, Rebecca clung to her digital marketing studies. While the twins napped, those precious, unpredictable windows of quiet, she would grab her laptop, completing readings or watching lectures with the volume low. Often she fell asleep mid-paragraph, waking to a baby's cry and the imprint of keyboard keys on her cheek. One night, particularly desperate for adult interaction, Rebecca found herself typing an email to Mark. Half delirious with exhaustion, she wrote about Emily's eyes, so like his, and Ethan's stubborn temperament. She described their tiny fingers and perfect toes, the way they calmed when she sang lullabies, how they'd already grown in just 3 weeks. Her finger hovered over the send button, a moment of weakness in the pre-dawn darkness. Barbara found her there, asleep at the kitchen table, head resting on the keyboard, the unsent message still open on the screen. Quietly, she closed the laptop, covered Rebecca with a throw blanket, and took over the 5 a.m. feeding when the babies began to stir. When Rebecca woke, the message had been automatically deleted as a draft. The moment of vulnerability passed. As the twins reached 3 months old, a new rhythm gradually emerged from the chaos. Rebecca established a feeding schedule that allowed her brief windows of productivity. The digital marketing certificate program, which had granted her an extension due to her exceptional circumstances, was nearing completion. Her final project remained, creating a comprehensive digital security newsletter targeted at small businesses. "Why security specifically?" Barbara asked one evening, cradling Ethan while Rebecca worked on her laptop, Emily asleep in the baby swing nearby. "I've been reading about data breaches during the financial crisis," Rebecca explained, typing one-handed while balancing reference materials on her knee. "Small businesses are especially vulnerable right now but can't afford enterprise-level security. There's a gap in the market, affordable, understandable security advice." Barbara nodded approvingly. You've found a niche. Smart. Rebecca completed her newsletter template at 2 in the morning, babies finally asleep after a particularly fussy evening. Security Digital for Small Businesses in Crisis, she titled it, adding subheadings about password protection, customer data safety, and affordable security software options. The next morning, Barbara reviewed it over coffee. This is good, Rebecca. Really good. Who will you send it to? Rebecca hesitated. I compiled about 50 contacts, owners of small businesses I worked with at the diner, a few clients from when I did housekeeping, some connections from your business network who gave permission. Start there, Barbara encouraged. Build slowly, quality over quantity. When Rebecca hit send on that first newsletter, she felt a curious mixture of pride and terror. What if no one read it? What if they found it amateur, uninformed? What if this first step toward rebuilding her life fell flat? The response exceeded her modest expectations. 10 readers replied with questions, 3 requested phone consultations, and 1, the owner of a small bookstore, offered to pay $75 for an hour of personalized security advice. Rebecca stared at the payment offer email in disbelief. Someone wants to pay me, for my knowledge. Barbara smiled knowingly. The first of many. Now, what will you do with this momentum? That night, after putting the twins down, Rebecca created a simple spreadsheet to track her newsletter subscribers, consultation requests, and the small income trickling in. It wasn't much, certainly not enough to support herself and 2 infants, but it was something she had built, something no one could take away. As fall deepened into winter, Rebecca continued producing her newsletter while completing her certificate program. The twins grew with astonishing speed, their personalities emerging, Emily observant and determined, Ethan curious and persistent. They rolled over, discovered their hands, began the babbling that would eventually become words. Rebecca documented each milestone meticulously, storing the photos and videos in a private folder she sometimes imagined sharing with Mark in some distant future, where he regretted his choices. Other times, in stronger moments, she recognized these memories as treasures he had willingly forfeited. The day Rebecca received her digital marketing certificate in the mail, Barbara insisted on a celebration. She bought champagne for herself and sparkling cider for Rebecca, who was still breastfeeding. They toasted at the kitchen island while the twins played on a blanket nearby. To your first professional accomplishment as a mother, Barbara declared, clinking her glass against Rebecca's. The first of many. Rebecca looked from her certificate to her babies, eyes stinging with unexpected tears. I couldn't have done this without you. Yes, you could have, Barbara corrected firmly. Different path, same destination. You're unstoppable, Rebecca. Later that evening, Rebecca received her first payment for consulting, a check for $75 from the bookstore owner. She held it reverently, this physical proof of her value, her knowledge, her worth. While the twins slept in their cribs, soft nightlight casting gentle shadows across their peaceful faces, Rebecca permitted herself a rare moment of optimism. She had survived the worst year of her life. She had brought 2 perfect humans into the world. She had completed her education despite impossible odds. She had begun in the smallest way to build something of her own. We're going to be okay, she whispered, kissing each baby's forehead. Mommy promises. With just 50 subscribers to her first newsletter and 2 babies sleeping in the improvised nursery, Rebecca couldn't possibly imagine that she was laying the foundation for a company that would one day be valued in billions. A company that Mark Reynolds would desperately try to acquire to save his own declining empire. The first 3 years passed in a blur of growth, challenges, and small victories. The twins transformed from helpless newborns into energetic toddlers with distinct personalities. Emily analytical and observant, Ethan creative and persistent. Rebecca watched their development with wonder, documenting each milestone in the digital journal she maintained, partly for herself and partly as tangible proof of what Mark had missed. On a crisp autumn morning, Rebecca chased 3-year-old twins around the neighborhood playground, their laughter floating on the breeze as fallen leaves crunched beneath tiny sneakers. "Emily, sweetie, your shoes!" Rebecca called, spotting the undone laces on her daughter's left foot. "Let's fix those before your interview." Emily scrunched her nose, reluctantly abandoning the slide to let her mother retie her shoes. "It's not my interview, Mommy. It's yours." Rebecca smiled, smoothing Emily's dark hair, so like her own. "You're right, but they'll meet you too, and I want everyone to see what a beautiful, smart girl you are." Ethan came barreling toward them, face flushed with exertion. "Mom, I went down the big slide all by myself." "That's wonderful, buddy," Rebecca praised, quickly checking her watch. "We should head home now. I need to change before we meet Ms. Peterson." The walk back to Barbara's townhouse took longer than usual, with Ethan stopping to examine every interesting leaf and Emily asking questions about the interview. By the time they arrived, Rebecca had precious little time to transform from playground mom to professional consultant. As she changed into her one professional outfit, a navy skirt suit purchased second-hand but carefully tailored, Emily appeared at her bedroom doorway. "Mommy?" she asked, her small face suddenly serious. "Zachary at preschool said everyone has a daddy. Where's our daddy?" The question Rebecca had been dreading since the twins began speaking hung in the air between them. She had prepared for this moment, rehearsed her answer, but the reality of those innocent blue eyes, Mark's eyes, waiting for an explanation made her throat tighten. Taking a deep breath, Rebecca sat on the edge of her bed and gestured for Emily to join her. Ethan, sensing an important conversation, appeared in the doorway and climbed up beside his sister. "Some children have a mommy and a daddy who live together," Rebecca began carefully. "Others have 2 mommies or 2 daddies. Some have just a mommy or just a daddy. Families look different, but they're all special." "But where is our daddy?" Ethan persisted, his expression mirroring his sister's curiosity. Rebecca stroked his fine blonde hair, so unlike her own dark waves. "Your daddy wasn't ready to be a father when you were born. Some people aren't ready for the big responsibility of being a parent." "Doesn't he want to meet us?" Emily's question cut straight to Rebecca's heart. "You have me and Grandma Barbara," Rebecca redirected gently. "We love you more than anything in the world. And someday, when you're older, I'll tell you more about your father." The twins seemed to accept this explanation, distracted by Barbara's announcement that she'd made their favorite snack. As they raced toward the kitchen, Rebecca exhaled slowly, knowing this conversation was just the first of many difficult ones to come. Later that evening, after Barbara had taken the twins to their swim lesson, Rebecca sat at her small desk in the corner of her bedroom, her laptop glowing in the dimness. Her newsletter, now with over 5,000 subscribers, had become a respected source of security information for small businesses navigating the treacherous economic waters of the recession. Her eyes burned with fatigue as she scanned news reports, searching for potential security threats to warn her clients about. A pattern caught her attention: unusual activity on financial websites that matched indicators from previous attacks. Following her instinct, she began drafting an urgent alert to her subscribers, detailing protective measures they should take immediately. By the time Barbara returned with the twins, Rebecca had sent the warning to all 5,000 subscribers, recommending specific actions to secure their systems before the weekend. She closed her laptop with a satisfied sigh, turning her attention to bedtime stories and goodnight kisses. Rebecca's phone began ringing at 6 the next morning. Groggy from a night interrupted by Ethan's bad dream, she fumbled for the device on her nightstand. "Hello?" she answered, voice thick with sleep. "Rebecca Johnson? This is Alan Morris from Morris Hardware. I got your security alert last night and implemented those changes you suggested. This morning, our IT guy confirmed we were targeted in a massive attack, but our systems weren't breached. You saved us thousands in potential losses." As Rebecca fully awakened, her phone continued to ping with notifications, emails, texts, voicemails from subscribers thanking her for the timely warning. By 8 o'clock, she had received over 100 messages, all expressing gratitude for her foresight. The following Tuesday, Rebecca sat in a downtown coffee shop across from Thomas Weber, a partner at a small investment firm that specialized in cybersecurity. "Your prediction saved millions in potential losses," Weber said, stirring his cappuccino. "How did you know before the experts?" Rebecca shrugged modestly. "I noticed patterns in recent activities that matched historical attacks. The financial sector has specific vulnerabilities during quarter-end processing." Weber nodded, impressed. "That's exactly the kind of intuition we need at our firm. We're looking for someone to head our client security division. Starting salary $85,000, full benefits, flexible schedule." The figure made Rebecca's heart skip. It was more than triple what she currently earned from her newsletter and part-time consulting combined. "That's very generous," she replied carefully, mind racing with possibilities. 85,000 would mean financial independence, a place of her own, college funds for the twins. "Think about it," Weber encouraged, sliding a business card across the table. "We need someone with your intuition and practical approach." That afternoon, Rebecca stood at the entrance to Little Explorers Preschool, watching through the observation window as Emily and Ethan participated in circle time. Emily sat attentively, hand raised to answer the teacher's question, while Ethan fidgeted beside her, more interested in his shoelaces than the lesson. They had grown so much, these miracles she'd brought into the world and raised through impossible circumstances. Emily already showed remarkable aptitude for patterns and numbers, while Ethan displayed creative problem-solving skills that surprised his teachers. They deserved every opportunity, every advantage Rebecca could provide. The job offer loomed large in her mind as she walked the twins home, listening to their excited chatter about the class guinea pig. Stability versus potential. Security versus possibility. These were the weights on the scale she'd been balancing since their birth. That evening, after the twins were asleep, Rebecca sat with Barbara in the kitchen, nursing cups of herbal tea while the offer from Weber's firm hung between them. "I have two options," Rebecca began, turning her mug between her palms. "Security or potential?" Barbara considered her over the rim of her glasses. "Tell me more." "The job offers security, good salary, benefits, stability for the twins. But I'd be building someone else's company, someone else's vision." Rebecca paused, gathering courage. "My newsletter has grown exponentially. I'm already earning decent consulting fees. If I focused on that full-time, created my own security firm, higher risk, higher potential reward," Barbara finished for her. "Exactly. But is it selfish to choose the riskier path when I have the twins to consider?" Barbara set down her tea with deliberate calm. "Security is tempting when you have children, but potential builds legacies. What lesson do you want Emily and Ethan to learn from watching you?" The question lingered in Rebecca's mind as she prepared for bed that night, weighing the practical against the possible. By morning, her decision was made. "Mr. Weber, Rebecca Johnson, I appreciate your generous offer, but I've decided to pursue my own venture. I believe I can create something larger than a single position." After ending the call, Rebecca opened her laptop and navigated to the Illinois Business Registration website. In the company name field, she typed Knight Digital Security, a smile playing at her lips as she honored the woman who had made this moment possible. 2 weeks later, Rebecca stood in a small, sparsely furnished office space she'd rented in a modest building on Chicago's West Side. The rent was manageable, the location accessible by public transport, and most importantly, it gave her business a physical presence beyond Barbara's guest room. Rebecca placed framed photos of the twins on the desk, Emily missing her front tooth, Ethan with chocolate ice cream smeared across his grin. Next to her computer, she positioned the framed certificate from her digital marketing program, a tangible reminder of her first professional achievement as a mother. She stood at the window, gazing toward the distant silhouette of downtown Chicago. Somewhere in one of those gleaming towers, Mark Reynolds continued his privileged existence, unaware that the woman he'd discarded as insufficient was building something from nothing, creating a future for the children he'd rejected. "Knight Digital Security," Rebecca whispered to the empty office, testing the sound of it. Not Johnson, not Reynolds, Knight. A new identity forged through adversity, shaped by determination. Her phone chimed with a calendar alert, time to pick up the twins from preschool. Rebecca gathered her belongings, taking one last look around the modest space that represented her leap of faith. As she locked the office door behind her, Rebecca felt a curious lightness. The path ahead was uncertain, challenging, potentially treacherous. But for the first time since that devastating night in her kitchen when Mark had declared her insufficient, Rebecca felt truly, completely in control of her destiny. Sitting in her tiny office, observing Manhattan through the window, Rebecca didn't know that in less than a decade she would be in one of the most prestigious skyscrapers in the city, making decisions that would shake the foundations of the company that Mark Reynolds was struggling to keep relevant. Rebecca's tiny office gradually transformed over the 5 years that followed her leap of faith. What began as a sparse room with a second-hand desk evolved into a proper business headquarters with 6 employees, state-of-the-art equipment, and a reputation that spread far beyond Chicago's business community. Knight Digital Security had become a respected name in cybersecurity consulting, with clients ranging from local restaurants to regional banks. On a bright Tuesday morning, Rebecca sat at her expansive desk, reviewing quarterly projections when her office door burst open without warning. Emily, now 8 years old, rushed in waving a math test triumphantly. "Mom, look, A+ on the advanced fractions test." Her daughter's blue eyes, so eerily like Mark's, sparkled with pride as she thrust the paper forward. Rebecca's irritation at the interruption melted instantly. She was in the middle of a crucial video conference with potential investors, but some moments couldn't wait. "That's wonderful, sweetie. I'm so proud of you," she beamed, angling the paper toward her laptop camera. "Sorry for the interruption, gentlemen. My daughter just aced her advanced math test." Rather than appearing annoyed, the 3 men on the screen smiled appreciatively. "Family first," commented the silver-haired investor from Boston. "As I was saying, Ms. Knight, your security protocols identified vulnerabilities our internal team missed entirely." Rebecca smoothly redirected her attention to the screen while Emily quietly slipped into the corner chair, drawing in her notebook as she often did when visiting her mother's office after school. "As I was explaining, gentlemen, your firewall configurations have significant gaps. Your customer data is particularly vulnerable during cloud synchronization." The meeting concluded with tentative agreements for a comprehensive security overhaul. As the investors signed off, Rebecca turned to her daughter, who had been waiting patiently. "Where's your brother?" "With Ms. Diaz in the break room. He's helping her with something on her tablet." Rebecca laughed. At 8, Ethan already demonstrated an intuitive understanding of technology that amazed the adults around him. "Of course he is. Ready to head home? I just need to finish a few things first." Later that evening, Rebecca stood in the twins' bedroom doorway, overnight bag slung over her shoulder. "Remember, I have to fly to Boston tomorrow for 3 days. Grandma Barbara will stay with you, and Mrs. Torres will drive you to school." Ethan looked up from the robot he was building, his expression suddenly vulnerable despite his usual confidence. "Why do you work so much, Mom?" The question pierced Rebecca's heart. Despite her efforts to balance career and motherhood, the demands of growing her company often pulled her away from the twins. Business trips had become more frequent as Knight Digital Security expanded beyond Chicago. Rebecca set down her bag and sat on the edge of Ethan's bed. "I'm building something that will last, sweetheart. Something for our future." "But we miss you," Emily added from her desk across the room, where she had been solving math problems well beyond her grade level. Rebecca pulled both children into a tight hug. "I miss you too. So much. But what I'm building now will give us security forever. And one day, you'll understand why that matters." What she didn't say, couldn't say, was how each business trip, Each late night at the office, each new client was another step away from the desperate young woman who had once slept in her car, pregnant and abandoned. Another brick in the wall between her children and the kind of vulnerability she had experienced. On the plane to Boston the next morning, Rebecca scrolled through photos of the twins on her phone. Emily winning the school science fair, Ethan at his first coding camp. Each image a milestone Mark had forfeited, each achievement a silent rebuke to his cruel dismissal years before. As she prepared her presentation for the Boston clients, Rebecca's phone buzzed with a news alert. Major financial institution suffers catastrophic data breach. She quickly scanned the article, her pulse quickening. This was exactly the type of attack she had warned several financial clients about 3 months earlier, a sophisticated intrusion through seemingly innocuous third-party software updates. By the time her plane landed, Rebecca had 17 voicemails from current and prospective clients, all suddenly desperate for the security protocols she had been advocating. Knight Digital Security's warning, initially dismissed by many as excessively cautious, now seemed prophetic. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of emergency consultations, media interviews, and hastily arranged meetings with financial institutions, suddenly eager to implement Rebecca's security recommendations. In her hotel room at night, she video-called the twins, listening to their day's adventures while simultaneously drafting security advisories for panicking clients. "You look tired, Mom," Emily observed during their third night's call, her perceptiveness remarkable for an 8-year-old. "Just busy, sweetie. Everyone suddenly wants Mom's help with their computers." When Rebecca returned to Chicago, she found her office transformed. The phone rang constantly, her assistant struggled to manage the influx of emails, and 3 different financial news outlets requested interviews. "It's happening," Barbara observed when Rebecca finally made it home, collapsing onto the sofa beside her mentor. "The tipping point." Rebecca nodded, too exhausted to speak. The data breach had done what years of careful reputation building hadn't fully accomplished. It had made Knight Digital Security a household name in financial cybersecurity circles. The following months brought explosive growth. Rebecca hired additional security analysts, moved to larger offices, and found herself invited to speak at industry conferences. The twins adjusted to their mother's increasingly demanding schedule, proud of her growing recognition even as they missed her consistent presence. One evening, as Barbara helped Emily with a school project, Rebecca shut herself in her home office for a crucial video meeting. The executives on her screen represented one of Wall Street's most prestigious financial firms. Old money, old power, the very world Mark had once claimed she could never access. "Ms. Knight, your team's analysis of our vulnerabilities was remarkably thorough," began the silver-haired CEO, his expression grave. "We've had 3 separate security consultants review our systems this year, and none identified the backdoor access points your report highlighted." Rebecca maintained her professional composure, though inside, a small voice whispered, "Not bad for a waitress from Iowa." "Our approach is more comprehensive than most," she explained, walking them through her methodology with confident precision. "We examine not just current vulnerabilities but predictive models of emerging threats." The meeting ended with an unprecedented proposal, $1 million for a year of exclusive security consulting. Rebecca's hand didn't tremble as she accepted. Her voice didn't betray the significance of the moment. Only after the call ended did she allow herself to feel the full weight of what had just occurred. She dialed Barbara immediately. "We got it. $1 million for the year." Barbara's delighted laugh filled the line. "I never doubted you would. What's next?" "We can finally buy the apartment, the one in Lincoln Park, with the separate bedrooms for the twins." The move happened quickly. After 5 years in Barbara's townhouse, Rebecca and the twins relocated to a spacious apartment in one of Chicago's most desirable neighborhoods. Barbara joined them, her own health beginning to require more support, completing their unconventional but loving family unit. The twins ran through the new apartment, exclaiming over their individual bedrooms after sharing a space for 8 years. "Can I paint mine blue?" Ethan asked, already planning where his growing collection of electronics would go. "Can we finally get a dog?" Emily added, seizing the moment of transition to revive her long-standing request. Rebecca laughed, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time, she could say yes without calculating the financial implications, without wondering if every dollar should be saved instead for emergencies. Yes to the Blue Room, and yes, we can talk about a dog now. 2 weeks after moving into the new apartment, Rebecca stood at the entrance of Knight Digital Security's new corporate headquarters, an entire floor in a prestigious downtown building with views of Lake Michigan. Her growing team of 20 employees gathered for her welcome speech, eager to hear the founder's vision for their expanding company. "5 years ago, I started this company with 50 newsletter subscribers and a borrowed laptop," Rebecca began, surveying the bright, modern office space around her. "Today, we protect the data of over 200 businesses, from local shops to multinational corporations. But our mission remains the same: to provide security solutions that are accessible, effective, and forward-thinking." Later that evening, Barbara watched proudly as Rebecca gave an interview to a financial news channel from their home. "The next major cyber threat won't come from where everyone is looking," Rebecca explained to the interviewer, her poise and expertise evident. "It will exploit the intersection between cloud services and mobile access points. That's where we're focusing our protective strategies." After the interview, Rebecca found herself too wired to sleep despite the exhaustion that had become her constant companion. She made her way to the kitchen for herbal tea, pausing to check on the twins before settling on the sofa with her laptop. As the city lights twinkled through the windows of their new home, Rebecca reviewed security protocols for her newest client, making notes until her eyes grew heavy. Eventually, she drifted off on the sofa, her laptop still open beside her, screen illuminating her peaceful expression against the backdrop of Chicago's skyline. The little girl who had once been told she would never be enough now commanded the attention of corporate boardrooms. The abandoned pregnant woman who had slept in her car now owned prime real estate and employed dozens. The struggling single mother had become a respected expert courted by prestigious firms. As Rebecca slept on the sofa of her luxury apartment, she couldn't know that in just 2 years, Knight Innovations would be valued at $200 million, or that the man who had discarded her as insufficient would watch her meteoric rise with growing desperation as his own company crumbled. As Rebecca slept on the sofa of her luxury apartment, a gentle dawn began to break over Chicago's skyline. 5 years had transformed not just her circumstances, but Rebecca herself. The desperate young woman who had once been deemed insufficient by Mark Reynolds had become a force in the business world, her name increasingly recognized in corporate circles that had once seemed impenetrably exclusive. Now, 7 years later, Rebecca stood on another threshold of transformation. The twins had just celebrated their 12th birthday with a party that would have been unimaginable in those early days, a science-themed extravaganza at Chicago's Museum of Science and Industry, complete with personalized experiments for each guest and a cake designed to look like the periodic table at Emily's request. "Are you ready for this?" Barbara asked, straightening Rebecca's jacket as they prepared to leave for the New York Stock Exchange. At 68, Barbara remained a steady presence, though recent heart issues had slowed her slightly. Rebecca inhaled deeply, smoothing her hand over the tailored Armani suit she'd purchased specifically for this day. "As ready as I'll ever be." The rebranded Knight Innovations was opening on the stock market that morning, an initial public offering that analysts predicted would value the company at upwards of $200 million. The security firm that had begun with 50 newsletter subscribers had expanded into comprehensive digital protection, specialized software development, and now employed over 200 people across 3 offices. "Mom, is my tie straight?" Ethan appeared in the doorway, fiddling with the blue silk knotted at his throat. At 12, he'd shot up in height, his blonde hair and angular features increasingly reminiscent of the father he'd never met. Rebecca adjusted his tie with practiced hands. "Perfect. Where's your sister?" Practicing her speech again. Ethan rolled his eyes good-naturedly, as if she hasn't memorized it already. Emily had insisted on saying a few words at the bell-ringing ceremony, proud to be part of her mother's achievement. Her academic brilliance had already drawn attention from accelerated programs at prestigious schools, her mathematical aptitude surpassing students several years her senior. The morning passed in a blur of camera flashes, handshakes, and the surreal moment when Rebecca, flanked by her children, pressed the button that signaled the start of trading for Knight Innovations. On the screens above, they watched as share prices immediately jumped, the market's enthusiastic response to a company built from ground zero by a single mother who had once been told she would never be enough. "You did it, Mom," Emily whispered, squeezing her hand as they watched the numbers climb. "You really did it." Later that afternoon, Rebecca guided the twins through the sleek new headquarters of Knight Innovations, occupying the 35th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper with panoramic views of the city. Emily and Ethan marveled at the cutting-edge technology, the modern design, and perhaps most impressively to 12-year-olds, the fully stocked snack bar in the employee lounge. "This will be our primary base going forward," Rebecca explained as they wandered through the executive suite. "We'll keep the Chicago office, but with our expansion into international markets, New York makes more strategic sense for headquarters." "Does this mean we're moving here?" Ethan asked, his expression a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. Rebecca nodded. "After the school year ends. We've already found an apartment near Central Park, and I've researched schools for both of you." The transition to New York represented more than just a business expansion. It was the final step in Rebecca's transformation from Rebecca Johnson, abandoned waitress from Iowa, to Rebecca Knight, CEO of a publicly traded technology company and one of the most influential women in digital security. That evening, in their hotel suite overlooking Times Square, Rebecca received the congratulatory calls and messages that had been flooding in since the market closed, with Knight Innovations shares up 37% from their opening price. Among them was an invitation to be featured in Forbes' 40 Under 40 issue, recognizing the most influential young business leaders in America. As Rebecca prepared for bed, Emily appeared in her doorway, still in the dress she'd worn for the ceremony but with her hair now loose around her shoulders. "Mom, can I ask you something?" she began, her expression serious beyond her years. "Of course, sweetheart." "At school, we're doing a family history project." Emily hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Everyone's supposed to interview relatives and create a family tree. I don't know what to say about him." The request hung in the air between them. Rebecca had always known this day would come, when vague explanations about their father not being ready would no longer suffice for her increasingly perceptive children. Rebecca patted the bed beside her, and Emily sat down, her blue eyes, so unsettlingly like Mark's, focused intently on her mother's face. "Your father and I met in Chicago when I was working as a waitress," Rebecca began, deciding that honesty, carefully filtered, was the best approach. "We dated for about 6 months before I found out I was pregnant with you and Ethan." "Did he know about us?" Emily asked directly. Rebecca nodded slowly. "Yes, he knew. But he wasn't in a place in his life where he felt ready to be a father. He made the choice not to be part of our lives." "Has he ever tried to find us? To see how we turned out?" The question carried a weight of longing that made Rebecca's heart ache. "No, he hasn't." The simple truth, stated gently but firmly. "But that reflects on him, not on you or Ethan. Some people aren't capable of seeing the incredible value in what's right in front of them." Emily absorbed this, her analytical mind visibly processing. "Do we have his last name?" "No. When you were born, I gave you my last name, Johnson. And then when I legally changed my name to Knight to honor Grandma Barbara, I kept Johnson as your legal last name." Rebecca had never wanted the twins to carry the Reynolds name, a subtle but significant rejection of the man who had rejected them. "One day when you're older, I'll tell you more about him," Rebecca promised, brushing a strand of hair from Emily's forehead. "But know this, You and Ethan are the best things that ever happened to me, and while I wish you had a father who recognized what amazing children you are, I've never for a moment regretted having you." The conversation seemed to satisfy Emily for the moment, though Rebecca knew it was just the beginning of questions that would become more pointed as the twins grew older. Someday they would want his name, his identity, the full story of their origin. But not yet. 3 months after the IPO, Knight Innovations had settled into its new Manhattan headquarters, and Rebecca had settled into her role as a public company CEO. The twins, initially uncertain about leaving Chicago, and Barbara, who had chosen to remain in her beloved townhouse with a live-in aide, had adapted to New York with surprising ease, thriving in their new schools and exploring the city with characteristic curiosity. On a crisp October morning, Rebecca was preparing for a board meeting when her assistant knocked on her office door. "Ms. Knight, the National Mathematics Competition results just came in. Emily's been named a national finalist, the only 7th grader to qualify." Rebecca's face lit with pride. She immediately called Emily's school to arrange for her to be quietly pulled from class for the news. 20 minutes later, Emily burst into her office, eyes wide with excitement. "Mom, did you hear? I made the finals." "I heard, sweetheart. I'm so incredibly proud of you." Rebecca embraced her daughter, marveling at how this brilliant, confident girl had emerged from circumstances that could have limited her so severely. The awards ceremony was held at Princeton University the following month. Rebecca sat in the audience watching as Emily, the youngest finalist by 3 years, received her award for exceptional mathematical reasoning. The pride that swelled in her chest was tinged with a bittersweet awareness that Mark was missing this moment. Missing the remarkable daughter who had inherited not just his eyes, but his analytical mind, refined and enhanced. Back in New York, Ethan was developing his own path to excellence. While less academically traditional than his sister, his intuitive understanding of technology had led him to create his first app at 11, a simple game that had nonetheless attracted attention from a coding camp director who had invited him to an advanced summer program. "Look, Mom," Ethan called one evening, rushing into Rebecca's home office with his laptop. "I fixed the glitch in the scoring system. Now it tracks multiplayer results across different devices." Rebecca examined his work, impressed by his ability to solve problems that challenged programmers twice his age. "This is excellent, Ethan. You have a natural talent for this." As the twins' achievements accumulated, Rebecca found herself increasingly in the public eye. The Forbes feature, "Rebecca Knight, Building a Billion-Dollar Security Empire While Raising Prodigies," brought a flood of speaking invitations, podcast appearances, and requests for interviews about her journey from single motherhood to corporate success. In each appearance, Rebecca carefully controlled her narrative, emphasizing her determination and strategic vision while minimizing the personal pain that had fueled her rise. She never mentioned Mark by name, referring only to personal challenges that had shaped her path. The twins, though increasingly curious about their origin story, respected her boundaries on the subject. One evening, as Rebecca reviewed quarterly reports in her home office overlooking Central Park, Barbara called with news that would cast a shadow over their success. "The tests came back," Barbara said, her voice steady despite the gravity of her words. "It's my heart, Rebecca. The valves are deteriorating faster than they expected." Rebecca gripped the phone tighter, fear constricting her chest. "What does that mean? Surgery?" "Eventually. For now, medication and monitoring. Don't worry, I'm not checking out anytime soon. I still have plenty to teach those remarkable children of yours." After the call, Rebecca stood at her office window, watching the lights of Manhattan twinkle against the darkening sky. Barbara's mortality, something she'd never truly confronted, suddenly loomed as a reminder of life's fragility. The woman who had saved her at her lowest point, who had become grandmother to her children, friend to her soul, would not be with them forever. That night, at a board meeting, Rebecca proposed a new initiative that had been forming in her mind for months. The Knight Foundation for Single Mother Entrepreneurs, dedicated to providing grants, mentorship, and resources to women building businesses while raising children alone. "This isn't just corporate social responsibility," she explained to the skeptical board members. "It's identifying untapped talent. Women who have succeeded against those odds have already proven their exceptional capabilities." The proposal passed, and Rebecca threw herself into establishing the foundation with the same determination that had built her company. Each achievement, each expansion, each milestone reinforced the truth she had discovered in Barbara's guest room years ago. Her value had never been dependent on Mark Reynolds' assessment. As Knight Innovations approached its one-year anniversary as a public company, Rebecca's assistant delivered an article that made her breath catch. "Reynolds Enterprises struggles as market share declines. CEO faces board pressure." The accompanying photo showed Mark, now in his early 40s, looking strained as he entered a corporate building. Rebecca set the article aside without reading further. His struggles were no longer relevant to her story. While Rebecca signed the documents for Knight Innovations' first acquisition, a promising data encryption startup, she couldn't possibly imagine that Mark Reynolds was desperately watching her company's rise, his own professional reputation crumbling as the business his father had built lost relevance in a rapidly evolving technological landscape. While Rebecca signed the documents for Knight Innovations' first acquisition, her mind briefly flashed to the article about Mark Reynolds' struggles. In the 15 years since he had cruelly dismissed her, their paths had diverged dramatically, hers ascending to heights even she couldn't have imagined, his apparently faltering despite his privileged head start. The thought brought no satisfaction, merely a detached acknowledgement of life's unpredictable trajectories. "Ms. Knight, the final details for the Tech Solutions acquisition have been prepared," Caroline, her executive assistant, announced as she entered Rebecca's expansive corner office on the 45th floor of their Park Avenue headquarters. "Everything is ready for tonight's announcement at the plaza." Rebecca nodded, her focus returning to the present. The acquisition of Tech Solutions for $350 million represented Knight Innovations' most significant expansion yet. Tonight's event would bring together Manhattan's business elite to witness the formal announcement, a strategic display of power and confidence in the marketplace. "Have the seating arrangements been finalized?" Rebecca asked, scanning the document before her. "Yes, all confirmed. We've seated Emily at the Kennedy Institute table. They're eager to discuss her early admission application to their summer program. Ethan will be with the VPs from Silicon Ventures. They specifically requested to meet him after seeing his latest app." Rebecca smiled with pride. At 14, her twins had developed into remarkable young people with achievements that continued to astound the adults around them. Emily's mathematical genius had drawn attention from prestigious institutions across the country, while Ethan's programming innovations had already earned him significant income from 2 successful app launches. "Did Emily finish her Princeton presentation?" Rebecca asked, remembering her daughter's upcoming interview for the university's elite mathematics summer program. As if summoned by her name, Emily appeared in the doorway, her dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, her eyes, so unsettlingly like Mark's, bright with intellectual energy. "Mom, can I use your conference room for the video call with MIT? The lighting is better than in my room at home." "Of course, darling. Have you finished your science presentation project?" "I finished last night. Ethan's helping with the programming component," Emily replied, adjusting the strap of her laptop bag. At 14, she carried herself with a poised confidence that Rebecca sometimes found startling, a young woman who had never known the insecurity of feeling insufficient. Rebecca watched her daughter disappear down the corridor, marveling at how the tiny infant she had once cradled in a borrowed crib had blossomed into this self-assured, brilliant young woman. The twins had not only survived their father's absence, they had thrived in ways that seemed almost like cosmic justice. The thought of justice brought Rebecca's mind back to the evening ahead. The Tech Solutions acquisition was particularly sweet because Mark Reynolds had reportedly attempted to purchase the same company months earlier, hoping to revitalize Reynolds Enterprises with their innovative security protocols. The fact that Knight Innovations had secured the deal instead was merely business, Rebecca told herself, not personal vindication. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Rebecca Knight," she answered crisply. "Ms. Knight, this is James Harrington, your CFO. Just confirming the final numbers for tonight's announcement. The market's going to react very favorably to this acquisition." "Excellent. I'll review your presentation notes before the event. Anything else?" "Actually, yes. Forbes is requesting an exclusive statement before the announcement." Rebecca considered this briefly. "Tell them I'll give the exclusive tomorrow. Tonight is for celebrating with my team and my children." As she ended the call, Rebecca's thoughts turned to the logistics of the evening ahead. The Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed for the occasion, with Knight Innovations' distinctive blue and silver color scheme dominating the decor. Her team of stylists would arrive at her Upper East Side apartment at 5 o'clock to prepare her for the evening, bringing the Alexander McQueen gown specially designed for this occasion. Meanwhile, across Manhattan, in a considerably less impressive office, Mark Reynolds stared at the invitation that had arrived that morning. The elegant cardstock announced Knight Innovations' acquisition celebration at the Plaza Hotel, extended to him as CEO of Reynolds Enterprises in what appeared to be a standard industry courtesy. The Tech Solutions acquisition had been a crushing blow to his struggling company, the very acquisition he had pitched to his skeptical board as their pathway to renewed relevance. "Sir, the quarterly reports are ready for your review," his assistant said tentatively from the doorway, aware of her boss's increasingly volatile mood in recent months. Mark waved her away, still staring at the invitation. Knight Innovations. The company had appeared seemingly out of nowhere 5 years ago, rapidly establishing itself as an industry leader in security solutions. Its founder and CEO, Rebecca Knight, was something of an enigma, rarely giving personal interviews, known for her brilliant strategic mind and her private nature. Who is this woman? He had asked his team when Knight Innovations first emerged as a competitor. No one had satisfactory answers. She had apparently built her company from scratch, had no family connections in the industry, and maintained a low personal profile despite her company's high visibility. Now, as he contemplated attending tonight's event, Mark felt a mixture of professional obligation and morbid curiosity. Perhaps meeting this Rebecca Knight would provide insights into how she had succeeded where he was failing, how she had secured the very acquisition he had desperately needed. "Tell Wilson to have the car ready at 7, he instructed his assistant, making his decision. "I'll be attending the Knight Innovations event at the Plaza." Back in her office, Rebecca finalized her speech for the evening, carefully crafting language that emphasized the strategic advantages of the acquisition without revealing proprietary details. As the afternoon waned, she closed her laptop and prepared to leave, stopping briefly at her private bathroom to refresh her appearance before heading home. The reflection that greeted her showed a woman transformed from the desperate, pregnant waitress of 15 years ago. At 37, Rebecca Knight radiated confidence and success. Her dark hair, now professionally styled in a sleek bob, framed a face that had lost the softness of youth but gained the defined elegance of maturity. Designer clothing had replaced thrift store finds, and the constant worry that had once lined her face had given way to the serene assurance of a woman who knew her worth. "Caroline, the car will be arriving at 7. I'm heading home to prepare," Rebecca announced, gathering her belongings. "Everything's arranged, Ms. Knight. Your stylist team confirmed they'll arrive at your apartment at 5, and the twins' formal wear has been delivered." Rebecca nodded her thanks and made her way to the private elevator that would take her directly to the building's garage, where her driver waited. The thought of the evening ahead filled her with professional satisfaction, the culmination of years of strategic growth, the public recognition of Knight Innovations' dominance in a field Mark Reynolds had once claimed she could never understand. As her car navigated through Manhattan's congested streets, Rebecca's phone chimed with a text from Ethan. "Finished the animation for tonight's presentation. It looks awesome. See you at home." She smiled, texting back a quick, can't wait to see it, before returning her attention to the city outside her window. New York had initially intimidated her during that long-ago tourist visit with Mark, its towering buildings and frantic energy overwhelming to a girl from Iowa. Now it was home, its rhythms synchronized with her own ambitious pace, its unforgiving meritocracy the perfect arena for her talents. At precisely 5 o'clock, Rebecca's apartment came alive with the efficient bustle of her preparation team. Hairstylists, makeup artists, and her personal stylist worked in choreographed harmony to transform the already elegant CEO into the commanding presence required for the evening. The Alexander McQueen gown, a masterpiece of midnight blue with subtle silver accents that exactly matched Night Innovation's corporate colors, had been created specifically for this occasion. "The car will arrive in 45 minutes," Caroline reminded her via text as the final touches were applied to Rebecca's makeup. Across the apartment, Emily and Ethan were completing their own preparations. At 14, they had already developed the poised sophistication of children raised in privilege, though Rebecca had worked diligently to instill in them the values of hard work and humility that had shaped her own character. "How do I look?" Emily asked, entering her mother's bedroom in a simple but elegant navy dress that complemented her dark hair and striking blue eyes. "Absolutely beautiful," Rebecca answered honestly, struck again by how her daughter's eyes, so like Mark's, now represented not pain but promise. "Where's your brother?" "Still fighting with his tie," Emily laughed. "He can code quantum algorithms but can't tie a Windsor knot." At 7 o'clock precisely, the Knight family gathered in the foyer of their Upper East Side apartment. Rebecca, resplendent in her custom gown, Emily elegant in navy, and Ethan handsome in his first formal suit, represented a vision of success and unity that belied their complicated origins. "Remember," Rebecca reminded them as they prepared to depart, "tonight is significant for our company, but also for us as a family. This acquisition represents security for your futures, opportunities we've built together." What she didn't say, what she had never said, was that each milestone, each achievement, each public recognition was also a silent rebuttal to Mark Reynolds' cruel dismissal 15 years ago. That somewhere, beneath the genuine pride in her company's success, lay the satisfaction of knowing she had become far more than enough. As the sleek black limousine pulled up to the Plaza Hotel, Rebecca took a deep breath, centering herself for the evening ahead. Photographers lined the entrance, capturing the arrival of Manhattan's business elite. Inside, the grand ballroom awaited, filled with potential investors, strategic partners, and industry leaders eager to witness Knight Innovation's latest triumph. "Ready?" she asked her children, who nodded with excitement. The limousine door opened to a flurry of camera flashes. Rebecca emerged with practiced grace, her children following with the easy confidence of young people accustomed to such events. As they ascended the steps to the plaza's entrance, Rebecca felt a curious shiver of premonition, a strange sense that this evening would become more significant than she had planned. While the limousine of Rebecca Knight stopped in front of the Plaza Hotel and photographers prepared to capture her arrival, she couldn't imagine that inside the ballroom, nervously adjusting his worn Hermes tie, was the man who had once discarded her as insufficient, about to discover the true meaning of regret. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel shimmered with calculated opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over Manhattan's business elite, their murmured conversations blending with the subtle notes of a string quartet. Rebecca moved through the crowd with practiced ease, her Alexander McQueen gown catching the light as she navigated between investors and technology pioneers. Emily and Ethan remained close, observing their mother's graceful command of the room with quiet pride. Rebecca paused to speak with the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, discussing the implications of blockchain technology on financial security. Mid-sentence, an inexplicable chill crawled up her spine. Some primal instinct, the same that had helped her predict security breaches before they occurred, alerted her to an unexpected presence. She turned slightly, scanning the crowd without interrupting her conversation. That's when she saw him. Mark Reynolds stood less than 10 meters away, a champagne flute clutched in a hand that bore a distinctly less impressive watch than the Rolex he'd flaunted 15 years ago. Though still handsome in his expensive suit, time had not been as kind to him as to Rebecca. His hairline had receded, and lines of worry creased his forehead and the corners of his eyes. He was staring at her with an expression that morphed rapidly from confusion to shock to dawning recognition. For a heartbeat that seemed to stretch into eternity, Rebecca felt the world around her fade. 15 years of imagined scenarios crystallized into this unexpected moment. Surprisingly, she felt neither the panic nor vindictive triumph she might have anticipated. Instead, a strange calm settled over her, as if this confrontation had always been inevitable. "If you'll excuse me," she said smoothly to the banker, "I see someone I should greet." Rebecca turned to the twins. "Stay here for a moment. There's someone I need to speak with." As she approached Mark, she observed his complexion pale further with each step she took. His eyes darted from her face to the teenagers behind her, widening with horrified realization as he took in Emily's striking blue eyes, a perfect mirror of his own. "Rebecca? Rebecca Johnson?" His voice sounded rougher than she remembered, a slight tremor betraying his shock. "Knight. Rebecca Knight," she corrected with a polite smile, as if addressing any other professional acquaintance. "Mark Reynolds. What a surprise to see you here." Mark swallowed visibly, his eyes still fixed on her with disbelief. I didn't expect. You're the founder of Knight Innovations? The company that's acquiring tech solutions?" "CEO and founder," Rebecca confirmed, her voice steady despite the thundering of her heart. She gestured toward Emily and Ethan, who had moved closer out of curiosity. "I believe you haven't met my children. Emily, Ethan, this is Mr. Reynolds, an old acquaintance from Chicago." Mark's complexion transitioned from pale to ashen as he took a proper look at the teenagers. Rebecca watched as recognition dawned in his eyes, the mathematical precision with which genetics had reproduced his features in her children. His hand trembled, champagne sloshing dangerously close to the rim of his glass. How old are they?" he managed, the question emerging as barely more than a whisper. 15 in August, Rebecca replied casually, as if discussing the weather rather than the children he had abandoned before birth. "Emily has just been accepted to Princeton's summer program for advanced mathematics. Ethan has already sold 2 applications to a Silicon Valley startup." Mark's eyes remained fixed on the twins, particularly on Emily, whose eyes so clearly mirrored his own. The resemblance was undeniable: the shape of Ethan's jaw, the set of Emily's eyebrows, genetic echoes that no amount of time or distance could erase. A photographer from the Wall Street Journal approached, requesting a photo of the woman who revolutionized cybersecurity. Rebecca smoothly positioned herself between her children, a practiced smile appearing as the camera flashed. Mark stood frozen, watching the tableau of success and family unity that could have included him. "If you'll excuse us, I need to prepare for my speech," Rebecca said, guiding the twins away. As they moved past Mark, she added in a voice pitched for his ears alone, "Interesting how you've met your children after all. Fate has a curious way of working, doesn't it?" Mark's face contorted with shock. You never told me they were twins." "You never asked," Rebecca replied simply, her voice devoid of accusation but weighted with 15 years of unspoken history. "In fact, your exact words were to get rid of that problem, as I recall." The crowd began shifting toward the main stage as the master of ceremonies announced the commencement of the formal presentation. Mark grasped Rebecca's arm, his expression a desperate mixture of confusion and dawning horror. "We need to talk," he whispered urgently. Why didn't you ever contact me?" Rebecca delicately removed his hand from her arm, conscious of her children's curious observation. "I did reach out. I was escorted out of Reynolds Enterprises by security guards. After that, I understood you had made your choice." On stage, the chairman of Knight Innovations Board had begun introducing Rebecca. Mark looked like a drowning man grasping for a lifeline. "You don't understand," he pleaded, his composure crumbling. "I was young, stupid. If I had known—" "If you had known what?" Rebecca interrupted, her voice finally revealing a flicker of emotion. "That I would build a company valued in billions? That your children would be prodigies? That I would become enough for you?" "Rebecca Knight, please join us on stage," the master of ceremonies called. With a final glance at Mark's stricken face, Rebecca ascended the steps to the stage, greeted by enthusiastic applause. From her elevated position, she spotted Mark in the front row, his expression a mixture of shock and belated regret that might have satisfied her younger self. "Ladies and gentlemen," Rebecca began, her voice clear and confident as she addressed the assembled business elite. "As the new owner of Tech Solutions, I'd like to share a story about perseverance. 15 years ago, I was a young woman without resources, abandoned while pregnant by someone who told me I would never be enough." A murmur rippled through the audience. Journalists leaned forward in their seats, sensing a story beyond the corporate acquisition. "That man told me I was just a waitress from Iowa who would never belong in his world. Today, that waitress has just acquired for $350 million the company he desperately tried to purchase to save his failing empire." All eyes in the room shifted toward Mark, who seemed to physically shrink with each word. Several executives in the crowd made the connection immediately, recognizing the reference to Reynolds Enterprises' failed attempt to acquire Tech Solutions months earlier. "What I learned on this journey is that our value isn't determined by those who reject us, but by our ability to transform rejection into determination," Rebecca continued, her voice strengthening. "This acquisition isn't merely a business strategy. It's proof that a single mother from Iowa can, indeed, build something extraordinary." As Rebecca transitioned into the technical aspects of the merger, Mark discreetly retreated toward the back of the ballroom, his face a mask of humiliation. Throughout her presentation, Rebecca delivered precise details about integration timelines and strategic advantages, never once glancing in his direction, though she remained acutely aware of his presence. After her speech concluded, Rebecca found herself surrounded by congratulatory handshakes and business cards. Through the crowd, she spotted Mark approaching again, his expression now hardened with anger beneath the embarrassment. "Why did you do that?" he hissed when he finally reached her. "Publicly humiliate me like that?" Rebecca met his gaze calmly. "I simply told my story. I never mentioned your name once. Any connection was made exclusively by your guilty conscience." With calculated precision, Rebecca opened her clutch and extracted an envelope, which she handed to Mark. "DNA test results confirming paternity and a court summons for 15 years of unpaid child support with interest. My lawyers will contact yours tomorrow." Mark's face paled anew as he stared at the envelope. "You don't need this. You're worth billions." "This isn't about money, Mark. It's about accountability, about showing Emily and Ethan that no one is above responsibility, not even the man who abandoned them before they were born." Mark clutched the envelope, knuckles whitening. "You've made your point. You've succeeded beyond what anyone could have imagined. What more do you want?" "Nothing from you," Rebecca replied, the truth of this realization washing over her with unexpected clarity. "That's what you never understood. Even 15 years ago, it wasn't about what I wanted from you. It was about what you owed our children." Emily and Ethan approached, their expressions curious but guarded. They had observed enough of the interaction to sense its significance. "Mom, the Princeton representatives want to speak with me," Emily said, her eyes flickering briefly to Mark's face. Rebecca nodded, placing a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Mr. Reynolds was just leaving. We have details to discuss another time." Mark stood frozen, staring at the children he had rejected before birth, the mathematical prodigy with his eyes, the technological innovator with his jawline. children who had achieved remarkable success without his name, his money, or his presence. "They're extraordinary," he whispered, more to himself than to Rebecca. "Yes, they are," she agreed. "No thanks to you." As Mark retreated, visibly shaken, Rebecca turned her full attention to her children. The confrontation that had dominated her imagination for 15 years had finally occurred, but rather than the vindication she had once craved, she felt something unexpected: liberation. Mark Reynolds had become irrelevant to her success, to her happiness, to her worth. Emily squeezed her mother's hand. "Who was that man? He kept staring at us." Rebecca took a deep breath. "That's a conversation for tomorrow. Tonight is about celebrating what we've built together." As they moved through the crowd toward the Princeton representatives, Rebecca realized that the revenge she had once fantasized about paled in comparison to the life she had actually created. The next morning's headlines would link her past to her present, Mark's rejection to her triumph, but those narratives belonged to journalists now. Her own story had evolved beyond the abandoned waitress from Iowa, beyond the single mother fighting for survival, into something entirely her own. While Rebecca directed her attention to her children and their bright futures, she couldn't know that Mark Reynolds would spend the night sleepless in his Manhattan apartment, staring at the DNA results confirming what was visibly obvious: that he had abandoned not just a pregnant girlfriend 15 years ago, but the two remarkable children who might have been his greatest legacy. The morning after the Plaza Hotel confrontation dawned with Rebecca's name splashed across every major business publication in New York. Headlines ranged from the factual "Knight Innovations acquires tech solutions in $350 million deal" to the sensational "Tech CEO's revenge. Abandoned pregnant waitress returns as billionaire." Her phone had been ringing incessantly since 5 in the morning, with Caroline fielding calls from journalists hungry for more details about the personal drama that had unfolded alongside the corporate acquisition. Rebecca sat at her kitchen island, watching the twins eat breakfast in uncharacteristic silence. They had said little on the ride home from the plaza, clearly processing the charged interaction they had witnessed. Now, with morning light streaming through the windows of their Upper East Side apartment, the time for honest conversation had arrived. "I think we need to talk about last night," Rebecca began, setting down her coffee cup with deliberate calm. "About the man you saw me speaking with." Emily and Ethan exchanged glances, their silent twin communication that had fascinated Rebecca since infancy. "He's our father, isn't he?" Emily asked directly, her analytical mind having already assembled the evidence: his shocked expression, the physical resemblances, the emotional tension radiating between the adults. Rebecca nodded, taking a deep breath. "Yes, that was Mark Reynolds, your biological father." "The CEO of Reynolds Enterprises?" Ethan's eyes widened with recognition of the corporate name. "The company that's been losing market share to us?" "The same," Rebecca confirmed. "There are things about your father and the circumstances of your birth that I've never told you. I think you're old enough now to hear the whole story." For the next hour, Rebecca shared the unvarnished truth: her relationship with Mark, his cruel rejection when she announced her pregnancy, his callous offer of money to solve the problem, and her subsequent struggle to survive as a pregnant, homeless waitress. She explained Barbara's intervention, her own determined climb from newsletter writer to corporate leader, and her decision to protect them from knowledge that might have been painful. "He said I would never be enough for someone like him," Rebecca explained, her voice steady despite the painful memories. "That he'd rather lose millions than ruin his future with me and his bastard. He didn't even know you were twins." Emily's eyes, so like Mark's, filled with tears, while Ethan's face hardened with anger. "Why didn't you tell us before?" Emily asked, her voice small. "I wanted to protect you from feeling unwanted or rejected," Rebecca explained gently. "And truthfully, I wanted you to form your identities without the shadow of his abandonment. You deserve to become yourselves based on your own merits, not in reaction to his absence." Ethan, always more impulsive than his analytical sister, pushed his chair back abruptly. He doesn't deserve to know us now, not after what he did to you, to us. Rebecca reached for his hand. That's your decision to make, not mine. He's your biological father, regardless of his past actions. You have the right to know him or not know him on your terms. The doorbell interrupted their conversation. Rebecca checked the security monitor, surprised to see Mark Reynolds standing in the hallway of her building. She turned to the twins, question in her eyes. "It's him," she said simply. "Would you like me to send him away?" After a moment of silent communication, Emily spoke for both of them. "We want to meet him properly. We want to understand why he chose not to know us." Rebecca nodded, admiring their courage. "I'll be right beside you the entire time." When she opened the door, Mark looked like he hadn't slept. His expensive suit wrinkled, dark circles beneath his eyes, his normally perfect hair disheveled. He clutched a newspaper featuring a photo of Rebecca and the twins on the front page. "Thank you for seeing me," he began awkwardly, stepping into the apartment and taking in the tasteful luxury of Rebecca's home. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you." "You're right about that," Rebecca agreed calmly. "Any conversation will be on my children's terms." She led him to the living room where Emily and Ethan waited, their postures reflecting a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Mark stopped in the doorway, openly staring at the teenagers who shared his genetic blueprint. "You are," he began, voice thick with emotion. "You're both extraordinary. I can't believe I didn't want to know us?" Ethan finished for him, his tone challenging. "Yeah, we're still processing that part." Mark sank into an armchair, his face a study in regret. "I wish I could explain my actions in a way that would make sense to you. I was selfish, immature, focused only on what my father expected of me and the future I thought I needed." Emily, always the analytical one, studied him with detached curiosity. "Why now? Because our mother is successful? Because you've discovered we're enough now that we come with billions?" Mark flinched visibly at having his own cruel words reflected back at him. I deserve that. But it's not about money. Seeing you last night, realizing what I'd thrown away, it was like the ground opening beneath me. The Forbes article published this morning noted that Reynolds Enterprises has lost 40% of its market value in the last 3 years under your leadership, Ethan observed with clinical precision. "Are you looking for a connection with us or with our mother's fortune?" Rebecca observed with quiet pride as her children displayed the sharp intelligence and emotional resilience she had worked so hard to instill in them. Mark appeared genuinely wounded by their suspicion, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I deserve your mistrust," he acknowledged. "But this isn't about money or business. Last night, seeing you both, recognizing my features in your faces, realizing the relationship I forfeited." His voice broke. "It felt like my entire life has been a massive error in judgment." For the next hour, Mark answered their questions with surprising honesty. He explained how his strategic marriage to a technology heiress had ended in bitter divorce after 5 childless years. How the company he had prioritized over Rebecca and his unborn children had gradually lost relevance under his leadership, while innovators like Knight Innovations dominated the market. How his life, which had seemed so perfectly planned when he rejected Rebecca, had resulted in professional stagnation and personal emptiness. "The irony doesn't escape me," he admitted bitterly. "I rejected a family to focus on building an empire, and I ended up with neither." As the conversation wound down, Mark turned to Rebecca, hesitation evident in his posture. "What happens now?" "The legal proceedings continue as planned," she replied pragmatically. "The child support assessment for 15 years with interest is non-negotiable. As for Emily and Ethan, any relationship with them is entirely their decision." "And us?" Mark asked tentatively, his expression revealing a pathetic hopefulness that Rebecca found almost pitiful. Rebecca studied him for a moment, realizing with surprise that she felt absolutely nothing. Not anger, not pain, not even satisfaction at their reversed fortunes. Just a complete and total indifference toward the man who had once shattered her world. "There is no us, Mark," she replied, using the exact words he had spoken to her 15 years before. "There never was." The finality in her tone seemed to deflate him completely. He nodded slowly, accepting her rejection as he once had delivered his own. "I understand," he said quietly. "Thank you for at least allowing me to meet them." After Mark left, Rebecca found herself enveloped in a fierce hug from both twins. "Are you okay, Mom?" Emily asked, her perceptiveness extending beyond equations to emotions. "I'm better than okay," Rebecca realized, speaking the truth. "I think I finally let go of something I didn't know I was still carrying." In the weeks that followed, the media storm gradually subsided. Mark made several awkward attempts to connect with the twins, expensive gifts, tickets to exclusive events, which they acknowledged with polite distance. The child support settlement was resolved through an extrajudicial agreement that Rebecca immediately transferred to an educational fund for young single mothers. 6 months later, Knight Innovations had successfully integrated tech solutions into its operations. In her spacious office overlooking Central Park, Rebecca prepared for an interview with Fortune magazine. The journalist, a respected business writer, asked thoughtful questions about the company's growth strategy before inevitably turning to the personal narrative that had captivated the business world. "Many readers are curious about how you balance your family life with running a corporate empire," she inquired, her recorder capturing Rebecca's thoughtful pause. "I've learned that true success isn't measured by what we build, but by why we build it," Rebecca answered carefully. "Every challenge I faced, every obstacle I overcame, every person who underestimated my capabilities, all became fuel for creating not just a company, but a legacy for my children." When asked about Mark Reynolds, whose company now faced rumors of hostile acquisition after years of declining relevance, Rebecca simply smiled. "I wish him the same thing I wish for everyone, the wisdom to value what truly matters before it's too late." That evening, seated in her penthouse with a view of Central Park spread before her, Rebecca watched Emily and Ethan studying together at the dining table. Their heads bent over their respective projects, Emily working through advanced calculus problems, Ethan coding a new application. They represented everything she had fought for, everything she had achieved against impossible odds. Her phone rang, her operations director informing her that Reynolds Enterprises had accepted an acquisition offer for a fraction of its former value. As part of the agreement, Mark Reynolds would be removed from his position as CEO. Rebecca thanked him for the information and ended the call without emotion. The news that would have once represented her ultimate vindication now seemed irrelevant. Somewhere along her extraordinary journey, she had liberated herself not just from Mark, but from the need to prove her worth to him or anyone else. As the city lights twinkled against the darkening sky, Rebecca Knight recognized the truth that had taken 15 years to fully comprehend. She had always been enough. And that certainty, more than any financial success or elaborate revenge, was her true victory. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.